Welcome back to Arizona's favorite game show, What You Give, You Get. The only show that answers the age-old question, what's a public school tax credit and how do I get it? Remember, the rules of the game are simple. Individuals may claim a non-refundable tax credit for making a donation or paying a fee to your local school to support eligible activities or programs. Joint filers are allowed up to $400 credit or $200 for single or separate filers. And those credits reduce your tax liability dollar for dollar. Owe $500 in taxes and make a qualifying $200 donation? Your tax bill is now $300. And if your donation is larger than your tax bill, the remaining tax credit can roll over for up to 5 years. Now let's get ready to play What You Give, You Get lightning round. Tax credit or not. The rules are simple. I'll give you a possible donation and you tell me if it qualifies for the public school tax credit. Here we go. First up, athletic participation fees. Correct, that's a tax credit. Academic field trip fee. Correct, that's a tax credit. Money for band instruments. Correct, that's a tax credit. Fees for out-of-state competition. Correct, that's a tax credit. Money for a school's greatest need. Correct, that's a tax credit. Donate money even if you don't have a child in our schools. Correct, that's a tax credit. Credit is available to all individual filers. Congratulations on lowering your tax bill by supporting Peoria Unified Schools. Remember, what you give, you get. For more information on the Public School Tax Credit Program or to make an online donation, please visit our website at www.peoriaunified.org/tax credit.
Let it snow. Let it snow. Let it snow. Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stopping, and I brought some corn for popping. The lights are turned way down low. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
When we finally kiss goodnight, how I hate going out in the snow. But if you really hold me tight, all the way home I will be warm. The fire is slowly dying, and my dear, we're still goodbying. But as long as you love me so, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. You know Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen. But do you recall the most famous reindeer of all? Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a shiny nose, had a shiny one, and if you ever saw it, you would even say it glows like a light bulb. All of the other reindeer, they used to laugh like Pinocchio. They never let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games. Then one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, he said,
Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?
Then how the reindeer loved him, as
They
they
shouted glee.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer,
You'll go down in history.
You'll go down in
history. You'll go
down in history. Yes, indeed, history.
right, sorry to be late this evening, apologize. Let's go ahead and get the meeting started, and I will now call the meeting to order. I would like to start with a moment of silence, and then, since I got here late, I'm going to lead the Pledge of Allegiance myself. I didn't get a chance to ask anyone, I'm sorry. All right, so let's have a moment of silence. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, I will now need a motion, please, to convene a public hearing.
I move that we convene a public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
We voice.
Are we going to do voice, or are we going
That's
to?
an aye for me as well.
Is Mrs. Sayas Martinez?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, or heard her? Yes, voice, then we can do either way.
My mic is never that loud.
Actually, looks like I am good now.
Welcome.
There we go.
Right. Okay.
Good evening, Mrs. Doan, members of the Governing Board, Mrs. Pallas Thompson. This evening I will present information related to the first revision of the fiscal 2020 operating budget for the Peoria Unified School District. And we'll be pulling up the presentation momentarily. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you'd expand it to full screen, please. Thank you again. Tonight, I will review the requirements related to budget revisions, as well as highlight the main changes to the maintenance and operations, district additional assistance, and classroom site fund budgets. Stewardship of community resources is one of the four perspectives of the district's strategic plan. The annual budget process is part of this strategic perspective to solidify and adhere to effective policies, practices, and accountability for district resources. A public school district must adopt an annual fiscal budget each year by July 15th, and we can revise the budget in December and May of each year. The budget revision being presented tonight allows the district to include prior year ending fund balances in the current year budget. Each year in July, Peoria Unified adopts an annual expenditure budget for maintenance and operations, also known as M&O. These expenditures are for regular education and special education and are day-to-day expenditures for the district. M&O expenditures include salaries and employee benefits, supplies, utilities, transportation, and other operational expenditures that are not of a capital nature. In this budget revision, the M&O budget is being increased by $4.1 million to recognize the fiscal 2019 carry-forward balances net of a transfer between maintenance and operations and the capital funds. Both the adopted and the revised fiscal 2020 M&O budgets include funding from the district's M&O override totaling $27 million. District additional assistance funds can be used for capital expenditures that include furniture and athletic equipment, textbooks, instructional aids, computers, and software. In this budget revision, the adopted district additional assistance budget is being increased to reflect the fiscal year 2019 carry forward and to transfer from maintenance and operations to the capital fund for a revised budget amount of $15.6 million. The Classroom Site Fund, as prescribed by Arizona Revised Statute 15977, was established in 2002 when Proposition 301 was passed. The fund accounts for the portion of the state sales tax collection as well as state trust land revenues that are provided to schools as an additional source of funding for teacher salary increases. The Classroom Site Fund supports both base pay and performance pay for certified classroom teachers. The budget in this fund is being increased to $22.9 million to reflect prior year carry forward budget amounts. The budget revision also includes a transfer from M&O to the district's Energy Water Savings Fund for capital lease payments related to energy savings lighting and equipment that has been previously installed throughout the district, and that transfer amount is $1.1 million. Further budget alignments for federal and state state grants and cash-controlled funds, will be made in the May 2020 budget revision. Based on the information provided, administration recommends that the governing board approve budget revision number 1 for fiscal year 2020 as presented. This concludes the presentation. At this time, I'm available to answer your questions regarding the budget revision.
All right. Ms. Underhill, do you have any questions? Mr. Sandoval?
Ms. Meyer, thank you very much for the presentation. Quick question for you. Our ability to move those dollars over and do a subsequent year, can you talk a little bit about how we're able to do that, based on, overall finance, really stewardship process, et cetera. But can you just talk a little bit about the additional dollars that we were able to move over into the subsequent year?
Certainly. It's remaining budget balance or fund balance, and what that means in the prior year, we did have remaining budget available that we carried forward to fiscal year 2020. Most districts do that. In prior years in the state of Arizona, that carry forward was capped at 4%. That cap has been lifted. Districts as a whole are looked at the amount of reserves that they have and their carry forward to ensure that they're solvent when we sell bonds. Rating agencies look at that carry forward as well. So you want to ensure that you do have a carry forward, and sometimes you have planned expenses in the new year, an example of which is this year we're going to have a reading textbook adoption, and so some of that carry forward, as well as some of the savings we had using net position with our Valley Schools insurance payment, will be funding that textbook adoption.
Gotcha. That's great. So overall, that's certainly a result of, certainly our finance team, being certainly responsible with those resources and enabling us to have those dollars to be able to move over to a subsequent year. Yes?
That is correct. And in fact, the Auditor General's Dollars in the Classroom report has a section on financial stress where they're looking at capital carry forward specifically. And so again, if a district were to have very low reserves, it would be an indicator that they might be under financial stress. And in years past, when the district had much lower reserves, we actually had that indicator with our Dollars in the Classroom report.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Is there any further discussion? All right, well, I'll go ahead and move that we approve the budget revision as presented.
Pardon me, Mrs. Doan, we'll need to convene from, or
Really?
Close out the public hearing if there are no community comments, and then with agenda item number 1, we would actually do the vote to approve the revision.
On my computer as an action. Okay. Okay. Pardon me. Then I will move to close the public hearing.
Second.
And while everybody's testing their votes, I will go ahead and say my yes.
Where is that? So at this point, we're at 5.1, address agenda and consider adoption or recommend changes. Does anyone need to make a change to the agenda? All right. So let's move along to 6.1. Or do we? Okay. Let's hear some staff recognitions.
No, yes,
Yes,
I can do that.
I see that you have some.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Stone. It's been a really fun week, actually. I know you guys have been busy, but it's been an amazing week. Congratulations to our Liberty High School football team. They won the 6A state championship game on December 6th in overtime, defeating Red Mountain High School 34-28. So that was pretty exciting. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend our SEATS event that we had a couple months ago at Peoria High School. Students from all of our high schools met to talk about how our community can support young people in their learning, and that was just an amazing event. And then something I've been talking about that just warmed my heart, and it's going to sound like it shouldn't from the beginning, but earlier this week we had a student who was struck by a vehicle while on his way to school, and that was just horrifying. Jennifer Hogg, one of our secretaries, our executive secretaries, was there. Student was okay, but his bike was totally destroyed, and his glasses were shattered all over the place. But working with our district SROs, and the district was able to get a bike donated to this young man. The administration managed to raise some money for glasses and a couple extra things for him. And I need to tell you, he wants to be a teacher. So I did put in a letter of intent for 2024 to hire him if he graduates with the expectations. He's a wonderful young man, and it was a very, very powerful day. So thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Anything else?
No.
All right, does the governing board have any recognitions? Ms. Underhill?
Well, I just wanted to, first of all, thank Danielle and her team and all the team that has worked so very hard this last week in the process of the superintendent search. And I also want to thank all the staff and students and community members and parents and everybody that has been involved in that. So I think it's been an excellent process, and I'm really looking forward to, our decision. But thank you very much for all you did.
Mr. Sandoval?
Thank you, Mr. Underhill, for that. I would absolutely, echo that. The process felt really fluid. I think what I really enjoyed most is, certainly the involvement of so many voices, in this decision. It's a critical decision, not only for our students, teachers, and staff, but, certainly a decision that will, continue to move PUSD in a trajectory that we continue to be seen, as a tier one, education institution, which definitely impacts our communities. So involving the community members, in this decision was, important to make sure that we get everybody's feedback, and like Ms. Underhill said, allowing us to be very informed to make a decision that has a global impact on the district as well as the city of Peoria and the other cities that flow into our district. So thank you for that. Also, I was able to visit the transportation department a week ago. I was like, as well. I mean, the process that they go through to make sure that every one of our students are to school on time, they are the first smiling faces and the last smiling faces that our kids see. So they are absolutely important component, a critical component to the success of our kids. But I definitely want to thank Mr. Pacheco, who has really created an environment that I think we should all be very proud of. It's an environment that definitely is very inspiring. All of the associates that I talked to, and the lunchroom that I went in, I mean, you can tell that everybody was there, excited to be there, inspired to be there, and certainly, loving what they do on a daily basis. So I want to make sure that I made mention of that. And the last thing I want to make mention of is when we talk about, it takes a village, and without question. But this village does include our community members as well as our partners, including the City of Peoria, the Peoria Chamber of Commerce. Today I had the opportunity to attend an event with the Chamber, an event that brought a bunch of partners together that collected a lot of supplies, toiletry, items for, our students in need, if you will. So, it's just, for me, it's going to these types of events and seeing how engaged our community is and seeing how involved our partners are to ensure the success of our students is certainly upheld, and by providing those resources that are so desperately needed to make sure that they're in the right mindset to learn and also, enjoy their holidays. So just a lot of great visits, and certainly, again, proud to sit in this seat and serve each and every one of you. Thank you.
Ms. Sehar Martinez? You have anything?
Thank you very much. I do. Just one, I'll keep it short. There are a couple of grants that our district has received in recent time, and I would like to have them acknowledged in front of the governing board, but one specifically, our governing board and our school district has been making a focus on financial literacy, and Michelle Bennett-Venga as well as Marla Woolsey have led an initiative to receive a grant. We are the only state in Arizona aligned to personal finance. I look forward to bringing her to the governing board and sharing all the information, how it's going to impact all our students so they're financially prepared as they lead and leave our future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. I would also very much like to add my heartfelt thanks to the staff that made the work this week so much easier and took care of everybody, took care of all our, the word just left me. All of our applicants. And it was a lot of hard work, and I know it was hard traveling, making arrangements, and just taking care of everybody. And I know that especially the PR team and Danielle, and just, it was a lot of hard work, but it was done very smoothly. It didn't look hard. So I very much appreciate the efforts. I appreciate all the public, the teachers, the staff, the parents, the community members, and the students that came to help interview and to give their points of view. It's nice seeing a different lens, seeing people through someone else's eyes other than your own. So that's very much appreciated, and I did dig right into those comments. So I appreciate it very much, and thank you all for all your help. So moving on to 7.1, are there any requests? I have no green sheets. There are no green sheets, okay. So let's move to the consent agenda. Does anyone have any items they wish to pull from the consent agenda?
I do, Ms. Stone. I'd like to pull 8.11, which is the temporary construction easement with the City of Peoria.
I think so. We need a second on that? I think you can pull it without one, can't you? Right, see, I think you can pull it without a second. Is there anything else, Ms. Underhill? Do you need to pull
No, I'm
anything?
good.
All right. So I'll need an approval to approve the consent agenda without 811.
I move that we approve the consent agenda without 811.
Second.
Mrs. Sejar Martinez?
I vote aye
Thank
or
you.
yes.
Thank you. All right, so I guess 811 is now 9-1, which is not on my thing, but anyway, we'll move to that. So, Mr. Sandoval, would you?
Thank you. Yeah, the reason I pulled this is I wanted to understand a couple things. I know this, it looks like the request came from the city of Peoria to us because they needed to upgrade the crosswalk on, looks like 95th Avenue in Deer Valley. So what I wanted to understand is the process, and the reason for that is this. The crosswalk that we have that's somewhat similar to this one at Peoria High School, 83rd Avenue, right, just on the east side of the campus, is one that I would love to take a look at to understand, how we can enhance that crosswalk to maybe include, a crossbar across the top so you can actually see the lights from both the frontal view as well as the side. Because right now, it's just on the sides of the street. And as you're coming around that curve, it's pretty close to the turn. And I think by adding, additional exposure, to that particular crosswalk, I think it'll definitely put our students and those teachers and staff who use it in a much safer, walkway, if you will. So really, that's the reason I pulled it. I wanted to just begin those discussions around the process, and then taking a look at, and not just that one, but, all the other crosswalks that we do have, and maybe even areas that we don't have them, that we, potentially need them.
All right, is there any further
I
discussion?
will
Ms.
like to
Sejar
chime
Martinez?
in on this one as well.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for your patience while I'm at the airport. But in regards to this topic, I would echo that sentiment Mr. Sandoval stated. As I've been able to visit the elementary schools specifically, I have noted some crosswalks that have been brought to my attention by our parents and staff. I have encouraged them to reach out to the Peoria Police Department, the ones that are in those sites, as well as the city of Glendale. And I'm grateful for the partnership that they've increased their observations and their proximity to our schools. But I would also take a look at, especially as we consider going out for another bond, that we look at those crosswalks for all our school sites.
Thank you. Mr. Sandoval,
Thank
did you
you.
want to bring that up later for adding to the?
Yeah, no, and I'll make mention of that at the end of our meeting, but I wanted to pull it just to kind of engage in that discussion, and, but I'll definitely add it to a future board agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move on to number 10.1, consideration of revision number 1 to maintenance and operations district additional assistance and classroom site fund budgets for fiscal year 2019.
We have to approve.
Okay, I'm sorry. I went and read all that for nothing. Let's go ahead then. It's not on my thing.
So I move that we approve 9.1, the temporary construction easement with the city of Peoria.
I'll second that.
I vote yes.
So now we're ready to move to 10.1, and since I read it already, let's consider adoption of the revision to the budget for fiscal year 2019, 2020. All right, I'll need a motion for that.
Okay.
I move that we approve the revision, number 1, to the maintenance and operation district additional assistance and classroom site fund budgets for fiscal year 2019, 2020.
I second that.
We'll see, I made you read it that time. Okay, the motion passes. And we can move on to 10.2, which is our superintendent goals for 2019 to 2020 school year.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Doan. It's a pleasure to share this with you. These goals are yearly goals aligned to Arizona Statute 15341A 39, and they're a continuation, if you will, of the goals that we have been discussing and were there for last year. There are 4 components that we place in the goals. One has to do with parent satisfaction, teacher satisfaction, academic gains, as well as other, and the other are aligned to strategic plan. And we've talked about these, but I'd like to go over some of them with you. So if we can scoot this down. We base our parent, component 1 on parent, and if I could read that, parent satisfaction, and that is a survey item. As you've noticed, I consider that it's typical. My child's school to be an excellent school. We have looked at this. The goal is to successfully improve the score for the last 3 consecutive years. And so we will be looking at certainly something above I'd like to see a 4.2 if we can hit it. So that is that goal. Component teacher satisfaction. Note that we have done a pretty good job, and again, it's a survey looking at considering everything. I'm satisfied working in my school or department, and maintain or grow the satisfaction score separately among teachers with 1, 2, 3 years experience. So we're looking at some of our newbies to see how they're doing. And this starts to grow. We want to make sure it at least stays or continues up there. With respect to academic gains, and note what I've had to take out is something that I really support, our growth goals, and the reason that it was taken out was I won't be here in July when those scores are here. So the scores are looking at achievement scores for the most part. Scores, as we've noticed, have continued to slightly move, but not significantly move. And what we're looking for is increasing proficiency in our scores. Math, certainly. Our ELA did do a slight increase. I'm not sure if it's our phonics or our focus on reading. We want to make sure that continues. But it's got to do it at a faster rate, and we know that. As far as ACT, some pretty, and that's a little bit farther down. Our ACT scores are moving up, but and note our children are all taking those. They're junior year, and so it's kind of, we get all kids, not just our college-bound kids that are taking them. So the scores are reasonably good, but not good enough. And so what we want to see is if we can squeak it, if I can live to see it squeak to 20, I'll know we're in the right direction. And that's what we'll want for each of those areas, whether it be math, reading, their composite, or science. Let's look up the student success. Some of these are the ones that are, again, if they're aligned to our strategic plan. When we look at the first one on student success, we're investigating, piloting, and implementing a K-12 reading program. Very excited about that, in addition to the expansion of our phonics program. And we have that, as you note, our phonics is K-3. We want to see how much money we have to be able to push it, assuming that our pilot comes out that we're doing some good stuff with it. we're looking at creating measurable outcomes aligned to our exit outcomes. As you've noted, we've had many years saying our children are going to think critically and creatively, they are going to do stress management, they have all of those skills that are needed in the workplace. We want to be able to measure those. And so we're looking at what are the benchmarks for measuring them at a third, eighth, and high school level and when they graduate. So that's something that our committees are working on. Very excited about the fact that every site administrator is being trained on how to analyze lessons more appropriately and give better feedback to our teachers. This is going to be tied in, hopefully, to our evaluation instrument that is moving on with several committees looking at that. And one that we didn't put in last year, but it's critical. And I know Dr. Reynolds is major influence on this, is increasing number of students who are enrolled in our AP courses and actually take the exams, and let's talk about passing them. So we have had very small numbers, and we've been working, he specifically has been working with our teams at the high school to say, no, the expectation is they're taking the class, they're taking the exam, and they're passing it. And so that's a strong initiative that we need for student success. As far as safety and well-being, Mr. Duguid has been a major influence on these. We're assessing the impact of our Boys Town program that we've put in for social emotional needs. It's being piloted at 8 schools. I believe 7 actually is what we've moved, and I'm looking for Sean, but I'm not seeing him. But we went with 8. We want to see, does this in fact help the well-being and emotional aspect of kids? How are we measuring that before we expand it to other schools? Thank you, Sean. I was just talking about you. Continue, and we have, at how many schools do we have Boys Town now? It was supposed to be 8, isn't it 7? Just show me a number.
It's 8.
It's 8, okay, good, all right. So
Sorry, first time using a
8
mic
there.
here,
Thank
guys.
Whoa, thank you, okay. Implementing stage 2 of our facility assessment, that's really critical as we're looking at the possibility of alternative uses for some of our schools, and we're doing safety audits with respect to that. Implementing district-wide validation and testing of emergency operation plans. We're going to be running a couple more tabletop exercises and how to reunify our kids in case there is a disaster and what's happening. We're real excited about that, and I know we have certain locations that are working with us. And then educating our community is really going to be key to not just talking about the words, but really what do we mean by diversity, inclusion, and offering a variety of programs that we're going to be looking at on what is microaggression and bias and critical conversations around those areas. So our employees and not only children need that, but certainly the adults need to be working on that, and what are some of the issues. We're implementing, finally, the first year of a 5-year strategic plan. We've had an 18-month plan that we've worked with. Hopefully the new superintendent will be able to see clearly what a strategic plan at least is outlined in a blueprint form. We're going to be providing awareness and understanding as well as factual information related to the results of our 2019 override to determine what did we do right, what did we do wrong, what is our community saying to us, and how do we assess where we need to go with respect to future overrides and as well as any bond issues. Effectively communicate the process to our stakeholders, and that's what we've been working on right now in support of our superintendent search for 2021. As part of the facility utilization program, we're reviewing buildings and site space usage and ongoing capital maintenance needs and making recommendations to the board very shortly in the spring or earlier, the spring of 2020. We're looking to continue our data management and cyber resilience policies. We've just found out today we are going to be getting an audit, and as Mrs. Myers was able to say, we are really into our cyber policies, and so we want to make sure that you're aligned to us and what we're doing. Continue the policy auditing and updating process to include additional policy reviews. We've done a really good job. We need to also look at our Peoria-specific policies that we have created over the years and make sure that it's what you want us to do and what we need to do, and that when we have a policy, we're actually doing that policy and doing it with fidelity. And then creating and implementing the plans and procedures and timelines for, and I added this one, for 2021, for 21-22, and 22-23, a 1 to 2 to 3 year process to address the results of our 2019 override. There were several items that were paid for items. What are we planning on doing to right now, to listen to what our community has said to us, and to then determine what we can do that will not impact student achievement, but in some places might have a value add to our community's voice. So we will be presenting that, and at your, hopefully we're presenting much of that at your retreat on January 4th. So that's the essence of the plan. Stand for any questions?
Ms. Sejar Martinez, do you have anything to say, comments?
Yes, do you mind if I start?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I want to highlight first three things. Thank you, Ms. Linda Pellis-Thompson, for staying vested, and you truly care about our school district and the people within our community. Though you know you are leaving our district soon, you still have very steadfast goals and high expectations and ambitions for our students. I want to acknowledge, thank you for doing that. The second point I wanted to bring up is, though we're voting on this measure in December, I assure the community as well as our staff and students that the board, our superintendent, and administration have been working through this information well before the summer so that we can get to the point where we're at today. And then last, this is a solid foundation, as our superintendent just highlighted, the board retreat in January, to help the board articulate our goals and help the board be and maintain accountability as we move forward into the future. Thank you so much for everybody's hard work, and Superintendent Pellis-Thompson, we are by your side to support you through your process.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I wanted to state that as well, that we greatly appreciate your very continually, large goals. So these are great goals, but I think your goals also speak to the amazing work that you have and your team have accomplished just in the last year and a half. I mean, we talk about having, implemented a social emotional learning curriculum. We talk about adopting a phonics program and now a literacy program, doing the safety audits, getting the cybersecurity policies up and running. I mean, so much work has happened, and so many things are underway as far as like the facility usage study, the compensation study. All of those things have put us in a position, after you are no longer in your position, to really move forward in a very, very solid way. So I just want to give you a general thanks as well for the hard work that you've done, the work you have laid out here, which is still very ambitious, and we're so grateful for that. And just thank you for keeping us and putting us in that position to move forward in a very strong way. I do have a couple questions, because I always have to. One question is related to the ACT. Now, I know in the past that had been funded through a Helios Foundation, et cetera. Are we still funded for that, for all students to take the ACT, or how are we managing that?
And I go ahead, Michelle, that's great.
Thank you, Mrs. Underhill, members of the board. ADE is going to be reimbursing districts for the test scores, so we'll make the initial payment. In fact, we're going through that process right now and registering with ADE to ensure that we receive the reimbursement. So that's the process for this year.
Okay, that's great. And then secondly, on the whole AP initiative, Dr. Reynolds, as far as if that is a cost prohibitive thing in certain cases, are we looking at that piece as well?
No, Ms. Underhill, the AP exams are paid for by the families, okay? We did a survey, actually, and because some people were saying that is probably the reason the kids are not taking the AP exam because of the cost. That was not what the survey suggested, okay? It was a very small portion. There should be no child, we should be able to find other ways, right, of having the students pay for, but they're minimal kinds of costs. So if it does stand in the way, maybe an ex-superintendent might put a benefit in, when she retires, to be able to pay for those AP classes. So that's the kind of thing that we need to do. That should never stand on the way of students. But the effect, if they do pass and they do get into a university, it's an enormous savings for parents, depending on the university.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Sandoval?
Yes, thank you, and Ms. Underhill, Ms. Sayo Martinez, I certainly agree with everything that you just said. With the certainly complimentary, acknowledgement, of Ms. Pallas Thompson's just unwavering commitment to student success, and certainly willingness to be courageous, and take a deep dive into the numbers, and take feedback from, all of our stakeholders. I've always said accountability, your knowledge equals accountability, right? And you're never afraid to take a look at the numbers and be held accountable for, where we have opportunities, and certainly celebrate, where we are showing growth and wins. From a, staying in alignment with our vision and mission, which is, you take a look at our mantra of every student, every day. It's we're a public school system, and our doors are open to every youth that enters them and that wants to enter in our school district. So there's a lot to consider, a lot of processes and programs, but I do appreciate the direction, and I'm certainly proud of the direction that this district is going in, from a transparency regard, from being courageous and understand where we have opportunities, which will just equate to our growth moving forward. So thank you for that.
And I would like to say that I believe you've set a pretty high bar for our next superintendent, whoever they may be. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate that you are willing to look at the hard questions and make the hard decisions. And that's what we need in a superintendent, a new superintendent, is someone, and to think, maybe outside the box there, a little bit of new stuff going on. So along with everything my fellow board members have said, I like the looks of the goals that you've set, and I appreciate the hard work you do.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Okay. So now, moving along to this ASBA.
We have to vote on.
We have to vote on?
Yeah.
Oh, no, wait a minute, where am I? I was moving along to the wrong thing anyway. All right, so I will need a motion to approve the goals that Ms. Pallas Thompson has set forth.
Second?
I move to,
Go
do we
ahead.
already have a motion?
No, we didn't have a motion. David just seconded you before you said it.
Go ahead, Monica. You're good.
I move to approve the superintendent goals as presented.
Second.
And I vote aye, yes.
Okay, motion passes. All right, now to 10.3, the budget process. Ms. Myers, welcome back.
Thank you again. Good evening, Mrs. Doan, members of the governing board, Mrs. Pallas Thompson. We're on the threshold of budget season, as you can tell, because we have two budget-related agenda items this evening, and I'm happy to share with you information related to the fiscal year 2021 budget process and the budget team for the Peoria Unified School District. Excuse me, Gary, are we in full screen so I can advance? You just go to the full screen, please. I'll make it work. Thank you. Tonight, I will provide background information on the budget process and the fiscal year 2021 budget considerations. I will also be available to answer your questions regarding the budget process, at the end of the presentation. Maybe I'm not making it work. Gary, I'm not able to advance this presentation, sir. Can we relaunch it? You'd expand it, top button to the right. Right there, up. Thank you very much. The annual budget process is part of the strategic perspective to solidify and adhere to effective policies, practices, and accountability for district resources. Specifically, district policy has budget process requirements in policies DA, DB, and DBC. For a number of years, employee stakeholders have provided input to this process through a budget team with representation from certified, classified, and administrative staff members and association group representatives. Last year, the budget team grew from 18 to 32 stakeholders who had the opportunity to participate in the budget process. Team members from last year can participate in the fiscal year 2021 process, as well as new members who have expressed an interest to join the team. As was the case last year, the budget team will meet beginning in January of 2020 through April of 2020. Governing board priorities, strategic plan projects, and administrative recommendations will all be part of the process. And I apologize, I'm having a problem with my presentation this evening. The budget team will continue to provide input on budget priorities, including salary increases for employee groups, benefit renewals, retention stipends, professional growth recommendations, changes to staffing levels, position reclassification recommendations, Prop 301, and performance pay amounts. The budget team will provide regular updates to the governing board on the group's progress, and budget recommendations will be brought forward during the month of April. And last year we did receive feedback from the governing board that you had asked to have at least one meeting to hear the recommendations and then a second meeting to vote, and we're going to make sure that we do that for you. Budget options for the budget team consideration will be prioritized, as I mentioned earlier, based on the governing board's priorities and administrative input, and will be based on the state budget funding levels and data from phase 2 of the compensation study, which is underway and will be published in segments this spring. Budget considerations and variables include Prop 123 inflation funding that will continue in fiscal 2021, as well as the capital restoration funding and the final year of the governor's initiative of the 20% by 2020-2021. District strategic plan perspectives and projects will also be a factor when prioritizing new funding and district budget recommendations. There will also, as Mrs. Pallas Thompson mentioned earlier, be discussion related to our override. And we will be looking at the programs and positions that are impacted by our current override and outcomes if that override is not renewed in fiscal year 2021. The annual budget considerations are a combination of internal and external factors. In addition to some of the priorities I highlighted earlier in the presentation, it's important for us to look at student enrollment and how that impacts our funding, as well as those funding levels I mentioned and new monies or acceleration of district additional assistance restoration. We're also very cognizant of insurance costs as well as utility increases and the impact of state retirement system employer contribution increases, and we know there is going to be an increase next year. Fuel costs are always a consideration, as well as contracted vendors. We do outsource our custodial as well as our substitute teachers, and so we're always mindful of those costs. Length of work calendars and additional days are things that are discussed with the budget team and become part of the budget process, as well as I mentioned earlier, the successful continuation of having M&O override funding within our budget. So with that, that's a general overview. Last year I presented in December a similar overview of the process. We'll kick off meetings in January with the budget team. We'll be providing updates regularly to our governing board. We'll look to the governing board for priorities from your retreat. Those priorities will be considered as we move through the process. With that, I can answer any questions that you have.
Do you have any questions or
I
comments?
don't have any questions. Do you mind if I start?
Okay.
I assume that's a yes.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
I apologize. Can you hear me better?
Yes.
She's probably flying.
Okay. My only ask is when we look at this process, two things. One, as we've heard from our community, our constituents, our staff, they're still unaware of the budget process. I would like the budget committee to consider almost like a listen, learn, town hall, here's our money, and an opportunity to put their input. One of the information or the slide decks highlights that the information will be determined by the board and the administration. I believe this is an opportunity where we can educate our community and have a shared decision-making model, as Dr. Reynolds had brought forward as well. The second request would be, which I've heard from the board, is before the final recommendation is presented, you present in one meeting and then we vote in a second meeting.
Yes.
And that's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Ms. Myers did address that second point and said that that will happen. So thank you for that. Mr. Sandoval, do you have anything?
Yeah, thank you. So my ask is this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when we talk about the team members and all those involved in the committee, what I'd like to see in that listing is not just name, but also employee group and title, just to have a little more clarity, on those individuals who are on the committee. In addition to that, there's no doubt that we are confronted with some tough decisions. With the override results. And I trust that you and team, will certainly, really look in every corner and in every area that, we can to ensure that we continue to uphold, excellence in education here in PUSD. That said, I think anything different in the process that you'll follow in this, current, I guess, budget process that, maybe we didn't follow last time? Or is it pretty much the same?
Mr. Sandoval, members of the governing board, Mrs. Pallas Thompson, we did reflect on the process last year. We actually did have a survey at the end of the team's work for feedback and input. And as I mentioned during the presentation, it's it's a collaborative effort, and Mrs. Ceja Martinez, I apologize, I was not able to fully hear your question. The budget team is not a board-appointed committee. It's always acted as a team to provide input. When the recommendations were made last April 25th of 2019, we did provide a complete listing of the members as well as their title. We'll make sure we do that at the first update for the board's reference and to delineate if they're classified, certified, or administrative, and if they have representation with any of our employee groups. So we'll make sure we bring that to you. So we're looking at data. We're looking at 1 year, 3 year, 5 year outcomes as we reflect on our strategic plan and aligning budget allocations to program outcomes. That's one of the projects where we're being more intentional. There's been additional funding. We're very grateful for that. But then we also have the specter of needing to pass a bond authorization and to renew an override. So we're in a very unique situation trying to capitalize on efficiencies, looking at opportunities with a fresh lens, as well as planning for possible outcomes with an override renewal and the need to pass a bond. So you'll see similarities to prior years, but we're using a lot more data and inputs. We'll have the facility utilization and capacity study, as well as capital outlay data on the capital side, and then phase 2 of the compensation study data inputs.
Gotcha. No, thank you for that. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, again, with the result of the override, that dynamic is definitely something that we'll need to overcome, right? But as we go through the process, similar to last year, one thing I would definitely just want to maintain top of mind is, you mentioned that the retirement systems are probably going to increase. I'd just like to make sure that we consider and look at any and every way that we could possibly ensure that's a wash in our teachers' paychecks, if you will.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Sandoval, members of the board, I do know you've mentioned that before. And the other consideration that is challenging is the Prop 206 minimum wage increase. You'll note that we had a consent item mentioning that effective January 1st, the minimum wage is going up to $12 an hour. And that puts pressure on all employers, not just school districts, especially as you have hourly team members who have approached or now are at the same level of their former supervisors. So there's that consideration, as well as competition with other districts to ensure we're attracting the best and the brightest, especially with our certified teacher pay. So there are a number of variables. We're being very intentional. We're going to use data and ensure we're bringing updates forward, but also considering your priorities, the governing board's priorities, as well as administrative's input and our community and staff's input.
Perfect. No, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Ms. Underhill? All right, thank you. Ms. Myers, thank you for that report. And I think it's very helpful that we're getting them more often. I think it helps newer board members to understand the budget a lot quicker than I did. So thank you so much for your presentation and for helping us with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dona, members of the board.
All right. So we're going to move along to item 10.4, which is the ASBA bylaw proposal. Now, my understanding of this is that we've seen this a lot over the past few years. The ASBA has a proposal. I don't see where I can click on anything in here to talk about it particularly, but it requires a 2/3 majority to pass any changes, and that's of everybody, not of the people that come. And so what they're trying to do is change that so that it can be, I believe, a 2/3 majority of the people that attend instead of, everybody that's not answering. So what we want to do is decide to vote to approve that proposal or to not approve it, for them to change it. So a vote by us to approve it will mean that the bylaw will be changed and they will be able to make changes easier. All right, so I would need a motion and a second.
I move that we approve the Arizona School Boards Association Article 8, Amendment of Bylaws and Core Beliefs, as recommended by the ASBA Board of Directors and Governance Committee.
Second.
All right. Ms. Sejar Martinez?
That's a yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, the motion passes. Well, now we're going to move on to our informational reports, which are, I would like to scroll through those, but they are always available online for anyone to look at those if they want to. We're going to scroll through them. It's our budget, facilities, planning, and construction report. And then we have our district budget report for the month of October. A report on upcoming meetings and events. If you see anything interesting, be sure to mark your calendar. And our district enrollment report for the month of October. Oh. And I apologize, I forgot the legislative updates, 11.4. Are there any?
Thank
go.
you,
Ms.
Mrs.
Myers.
Doan, members of the board, Mrs. Pallas Thompson. I do have a legislative update this evening. I previously shared with the governing board that the state of Arizona's fiscal year 2020 budget included a school safety program expansion with allocated funding for schools to hire SROs and social workers and probation officers and school counselors. And the program expansion allocated $20 million of grant funding statewide, with the Arizona Department of Education managing a grant application process that concluded in September 27th. And so at that point, I gave you an update that we joined 200 other school districts to apply and throw our hat in the ring for grants for social workers. And we are very pleased that last Friday, a report was issued by ADE that Peoria Unified made the list. And of the 22 schools that we submitted an application for, 13 of our schools are on the list pending approval. I do have to have that caveat for tomorrow. The state board will vote to approve the recommendations, but we're on the recommended list. And of those 13 schools, 5 are high schools and 8 are elementary schools.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's good news. All right. And let's move on to 12.1. This is our board member opportunity to readdress agenda items. Is there any need? Ms. Sejar Martinez?
None at this time, thank you.
Thank you. All right, and here, let's show our draft agenda. Let's pop it up there. For the January 9th regular board meeting, 2020. And it won't have a lot on there because it'll have to be filled in, obviously. Okay, thank you very much. So now on to 12.3, which is request for agenda items for future governing board meetings. Mr. Sandoval, I believe you have one.
I do. Thank you for that. So, yeah, I would like to, and this could be in a Friday report. I just want to understand the process of how we worked with the city to upgrade our crosswalks throughout the district or add, right? And then we can kind of move from there to understand, where we can prioritize those or how we can prioritize those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Underhill?
I don't have a additional item, but I just wondered if we'll be looking through all these future items at our retreat to determine status. Yeah.
Ms. Sehar
That is
Martinez?
correct, and I'll second
I'm sorry?
Mr. Sandoval.
Okay. Second, Mr.
And then Ms. Underhill, that is correct. There's only one thing I want to add, which is our tardy or sweep policy for our students at the high school level. And that can just be in our board reports at this time.
Ms. Sehar Martinez, we were unable to understand your last request.
Oh, I apologize. I would like a board report on our tardy or sweep attendance process and policy to the board and how it's enacted at the high school level.
I'll second that.
Okay, for myself, there are perhaps a couple of things I would like to look at. First of all, I learned we have some new teachers from the Philippines, and I would love to meet them. If we could invite them to a governing board meeting, can I get a second on that? I would love to make them feel welcome.
Second.
And just, I'd love to do that. And also, I noticed that we have a little bit on here on, we want a list, it says a list of all employees not compensated during board-approved recesses. And I think that has something to do with our classified. I'm interested in trying to find ways that we can compensate them a little better. I believe that we have a lot of struggling classified in our district, and that's hard. That's really hard. So if we could put that on a study session or start it in a report, however the staff feels is the best way to start that off, I'd love to learn more about that and how we can help that situation.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it relates to the one on 11.7 about being able to use accrued time over scheduled break. So I think that's definitely something we're interested in talking
All
about.
right. Okay. And with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
We're going to say aye, or we're going to all vote?
Yeah, take it out.
Aye. Yes.
We go, yes. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.